Okay, starting over since we've got a computer issue. This one, we got to split it up. We got to split it up. On the one side, we're going to take the left half of this inequality. And on the other side, we're going to take the other half of the inequality. And solve them out separately. So inequalities, you do everything like you would for an equation, except if you multiply or divide by a negative, you flip the inequality symbol. So our very first step is to get rid of this -3. So we're going to multiply by -3 for both sides. Since it was negative, this inequality gets flipped. So instead of pointing to the left, we're going to flip it so it points to the right. And we get -6, x minus 4. Add 4, you get -2 to x. Before we go on to graph this, which we're going to have to do, graph and write the graph the solution and write the interval. Before you go on to graph, you flip, so x is always on the left. So imagine looking at that in the mirror, basically. We're going to flip the whole thing over. So x goes to the left, the -2 goes to the right, and the inequality is going to flip since we flipped the whole thing over. The other way to think about it is it's currently pointing towards the x. So after we flip it, it still needs to be pointing towards the x. So that's part of our answer. On the other side, again, same first step. We're multiplying by -3. Cancels out. Multiply by -3. You get -18. But since it was negative, you flip the inequality. So instead of pointing left, it now points right. X minus 4. Add 4. You get -14x. We didn't do anything to flip it, so it points that way. So we need to graph these two solutions. We've got -2 and -14 are our numbers, so we're going to put those on the number line. -2 and -14. -14 would be more to the left than -2. At -14, it has a bracket because of the equal, and it's pointing to the right because the arrow is pointing to the right. So a bracket with an arrow pointing to the right. -2, it's going to have a parenthesis because it does not have the or equal to, and it's got the arrow pointing to the left, so a parenthesis pointing to the left. These two arrows go together, makes that inequality right there, everything between -14 and -2. So it's -14 to -2, parenthesis on the -2, bracket on the -14. There's your interval. When you throw an x squared into an inequality, you have to solve it as if it's not an inequality. So if that was an equation, instead it'd be equals 0. And then we're going to solve it by factoring. So we can factor x because that's a common factor. And then solve each piece. You get x equals 0. And you get x plus 3 equals 0, so x equals -3. Those are called critical numbers. Sometimes those will be called critical numbers, or solutions to critical numbers. That vocab word is used later. So now we think about the graph of this thing. Since it's x squared, it's a parabola. It's a parabola that opens up like a U. It crosses the x-axis twice, at 0 and -3. -3 is more to the left of 0, though, so draw it, write them in order. Then we look at our inequality symbol. It was x squared is less than or equal to. Less than means we're looking at the bottom side of this graph. Bottom side of the graph. The bottom side has the one piece to it. It's all connected, has one piece from -3 to 0. The last thing you need to check is that it's got the or equal to. Or equal to means that this answer is going to have brackets instead of parentheses. If it was just less than, it would have parentheses. Okay. Investment. Simple interest. Simple interest. Interest equals principal times rate times time. You got to know that formula. So in this case, we have two accounts. We have one where we're investing $1,300. That's P. The rate is 5%, so that's 0.05. We don't have the other stuff yet. Let's see. The other account, we have interest equals principal, rate, and time. Second account, we have $4,000. The rate is 8%, so 0.08. How many years? So that means T is what we're solving for, so we put the X there. What will it take for the balances of the two accounts to total $9,000? So whatever we get here, this is interest, and this is interest. Multiply these out. 1,300 times 0.05 times X. That's 65X. Multiply these out. 320X. Now, it does talk about the balances, which is the total. So 65X is how much was added on to our account. We started with 1,300. 65X gets added on. This is the total for this account. This one, the total started with 4,000. We're adding on the interest, 320X. And then it said, when will the two accounts combined equal 9,000? So when will these two combined equal 9,000? So when will 1,300 plus 65X plus 4,000 plus 320X, when will that total equal 9,000? So that's 385X plus 5,300. Subtract, you get 3,700. And then divide by 385 to get X, which is a decimal. About 9.61. That was X, which was time, so that's years. So the hardest part about these problems is paying attention to what it's asking. You got to pay attention if it says, if it's like the total of the account balances, or if it gives you a total total interest earned after a certain period or whatever. It is the total of the balances you have to add on the principal. Tricky too. This one's a little bit tricky. It's a concentration problem, so I always start these with, we're mixing two things to get a total, a combined. The two things we're mixing, this is 84% sugar, and it says how many gallons, so we're going to call that X. And it says we're mixing that with 1 gallon of pure water to get 70%. We don't know how much we're going to have there either, sort of. So, the tricky thing about this is pure water. This is 84% sugar. Typically, pure water isn't going to have any sugar in it, because then it wouldn't be pure. So, it's 0%. If it had sugar in it, it wouldn't be pure. It would be sugar water. And then the other part about this, you could call this Y and make two equations. I think it's actually a little bit easier to know that if you've got a gallon and you add X more gallons to it, you're going to end with X plus 1. You've got 1, you add X, you're going to end with X plus 1. So when you set up these boxes or buckets or whatever you want to call them, canisters, multiply within the canister. So 84% times X is 0.84X. 0 times 1 is 0. 0.70 times X plus 1. You do need to distribute that. So distribute your 0.7 and then solve this out. Subtract 0.7X. And then divide. You get X equals 5. You get 5 gallons. With these mixture problems, I think you are always allowed a calculator on these mixture problems like this. Write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form given the slope and an x-intercept. So the biggest mistake here is misreading, thinking that said y. If that said y, this would be really easy. But it doesn't. It says x, which means the point is 2, 0. Think of the x-intercept as a point. So that's x1 and y1. We're going to plug those numbers into point slope. Now, plug in m, which is 3/5. Plug in x1, which is 2. Plug in y1, which is 0. And then just rearrange this. Just do the algebra to rearrange it in slope-intercept form. Y minus 0 is already y equals. We just have to distribute 3/5 x minus 2 times 3/5. You do multiply top to top, bottom times bottom, and the slope-intercept form. So this is similar to the one we did earlier. Critical values means get the solutions, get the x equals. And it does say use your graphing calculator. So you can just type this into your graphing calculator. And then do the graph it, and then get the x-intercepts. So on a Casio, that would be g-solve root. you G-solve root, so graph it, G-solve root. If you have a TI, you graph it and then go calc intercept, or calc 0. So depending on which calculator you're using. So when you do that, you get two answers for x equals 6. Ah, got my signs backwards. That's too many 6s. I don't like that. -1, positive 1.6 repeating from your calculator. You could write that as a fraction also. 5/3. Doesn't matter. So writing the solution, all we need to know is, does this graph open up or down? Are we looking at the top or the bottom? In brackets or parentheses. So this, since it's negative 3x squared, that means it's opening down for all of these. So across the x-axis at -1 and positive 1.6. And it's less than, which means we're looking at the bottom, which has two pieces to it. So it's going to have the two pieces. And I know to put parentheses because it does not have the equals. Not any equals there, so I know these are parentheses. So that's negative infinity to the first number. And then the 1.6 repeating to positive infinity. Because it had the two parts with the arrows. The only thing that changes for this next one is the inequality. It's now going to have brackets. And we're now also looking at the top because it was greater than. So greater than means it's only going to have the one section in it. So it's going to have the one piece to the answer. And it's going to have brackets because of the or equal. So there's your answer.